Drew, are you still on your Zoom? Yes. Can you mute yourself? Thank you. All right, good morning, everybody. So I give this kind of like annual talk where I discuss like what's going on with the clinical allergy research. So what we're basically going to do today is go over what studies are currently done or what's been recently completed, and if there's anything that's new that's popped out, papers and other things that we can discuss, and based on the things that we did here in Seattle, among many other places. All right, so here's my disclosures. The word of the day is allergen, and go from there. So SAARI, Seattle Allergy Asthma Research Institute, used to be Asthma Inc. And the focus has still been the same over the 5 years that I've taken over. It's my 5th year right now, to continue our partnership with local scientists and with UW as well as Benaroya. For anybody who wants to see or what's going on currently or wants to sign up for studies, seattleallergy.org, simple website, go to that. And there is a database that any patient can go into and give a description of like what they have. And then this is all protected. And we have now over 1,600 patients in our research database. We have some students actually doing projects on this. So residents and other people kind of looking at what the kind of regional problems and allergy are in this area. CFAC was an organization started many years ago, kind of about a decade or so ago, but it's kind of gone by the wayside because of a lot of the kind of the key leadership positions have all either retired or kind of moved on. But there's a whole host of new people that have kind of come into the area, and that I think a new partnership can be reestablished and restored. So potentially coming in fall 2023, the new version of the Seattle Food Allergy Consortium. All right, so let's go through some clinical food allergy. The problem. So estimated of up to 15 million Americans have true food allergy, about 4% of adults and 8% of children. This kind of basically is similar numbers through most of the Western world, with some maybe a little bit higher in Australia and Western Europe. Between 1997 to 2011, per the CDC, food allergy among children increased by 50%. Europe, as well as the top allergens, continues to be milk, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, wheat, soy, fish, and shellfish. And the big difference with milk and egg, because milk and egg have been with us since food allergy was detected over 100 years ago with a relatively new testing modality, which was skin testing. The biggest difference now is that the time of outgrowth. So now the average age of outgrowth for egg and milk is 15 years of age, as opposed to mostly resolving before they're the age of 1 or 2. So estimated costs about $25 billion annually. All right. So food allergy. This is some data that I pulled from the Northwest Asthma Allergy EMR, the old one. So in 2006, there were 4,200 visits for food allergies, with the food allergy diagnosis coded for any codes related to it. 33% of all office visits in 2017. Last time I pulled this, there were 12,000 office visits for allergies, and was the 60%. So the majority of the visits were related to food allergy. And this is just to see the relative differences in terms of like all food allergy versus peanut versus tree nut allergies in those two timeframes. Okay, so the various different areas of investigation for food allergy include epicutaneous immunotherapy, which we'll talk about first, oral immunotherapy, now both clinical and investigational, biologic therapies, small molecule inhibition, which is a relatively new thing that we'll talk about, and we have a few trials going on for that, as well as primary prevention as well. So epicutaneous immunotherapy update. So we've been doing patch therapy for quite a number of years here in Seattle. So with VIPES that started back in 2013. So that was the phase 2 peanut patch study. So it's been over a decade that we've been doing peanut patch trials. And so we went through phase 3, which was PEPITES, and then rollover people, realize, and then EPITOPE and EPIPEX. So EPITOPE and EPIPEX just got published in New England Journal earlier this month. So it was a phase 3 trial for epicutaneous immunotherapy in toddlers. So this was a multi-center, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial for children of the ages of 1 to 3, with the peanut patch versus placebo for 12 months. So the peanut patch has 250 micrograms of peanut protein in it. So it's this small little patch that goes on the back of the child's back. There are 6 sites in their mid and upper back where it's put. It's like put right between the shoulder blades, and they're applied initially for about 3 hours, and then it's slowly increased over the course of 4 weeks to daily. And they kind of rotate these patch sites over 6 sites over their back. So of the 362 patients, 84.8% completed the trial. And let's go into it. So just to look at the peanut allergy characteristics of these patients. So the median kind of IgE for peanut was similar between both the placebo and active groups. So 13.4 versus 14.8. And then the characteristics of their eliciting dose. All these children had to go through a double-blind placebo-controlled food challenge, and they used the standard Practol guidelines, starting at 1 milligram of peanut protein, followed by 3, 10, 30, 100, 300. So cumulative total of 444 milligrams of peanut. And you can see on the left side is the active kids, and then on the right side is the placebo kids, and they all had very similar kind of threshold breakthrough. So the vast majority occurred between 100 to 300 milligrams. And to give you a sense, about a peanut's about 280 to 300 milligrams. So the majority of these kids had a reaction, true reaction, that was called by an investigator by 100 to 300 milligrams of peanut protein, which is important because the improvement is going to be relative to where they started. So here is the response. So 67% of the kids in the peanut patch versus 33% in the placebo group had a positive was a responder. And this is the definition of a responder. So children who reacted at the 30, had a eliciting dose at the 30 milligrams, the 100 milligrams, or the 300 milligram dose, had to tolerate 1,000 milligrams of peanut after a year of therapy. So that's about 3 to 4 peanuts, 3.5 peanuts or so. And the kids that reacted very low, so the 1 to 3 milligram kids, had to tolerate 300 milligrams of peanut. Okay, which is actually a much higher bar than like Aimmune's target, which was 600 milligrams. So there was a pretty significant bar to cross for these kiddos after a year of therapy. But you can see that the majority did indeed cross this threshold. The other thing that was seen was a diminishment of the severity of reactions during the double-blind placebo-controlled food challenge at the end of 12 months. Keep in mind that the challenge actually pushed them much higher at the exit challenge. So along with that 300 milligram dose, they had 1,000 and then a 2,000 milligram dose. That if they passed the 1,000, then they proceeded to the 2,000 milligrams. And you can see that there was a significant difference in the amount of kids who had moderate to severe reactions in the treatment group versus the placebo group. And whereas basically didn't significantly change with the placebo patches. Adverse events, basically everybody had some sort of adverse event during the trial. These are toddlers, so they're always going to get sick of some type. And so application site reactions, basically everybody in the peanut patch, but also interestingly enough in the placebo, they also had topical reactions to this patch site specifically. There was one anaphylactic reaction that was potentially related to the patch, but it wasn't super clear that it was absolutely related, but it was a few. But there was no anaphylactic reactions related to intervention in the placebo group. So it was higher than placebo. So the most frequent reported adverse events was site erythema at 98%, pruritus and swelling at 72%, versus say placebo, and that's very common, especially in the very beginning. So I've taken probably around at this point over 100 children through various different patch trials, and we see this all the time. So when you get started, they're going to have these big, large, red, angry sites that respond beautifully to topical steroids. In the trial, they provide hydrocortisone, but almost always I routinely prescribe triamcinolone that they would just apply kind of like on a routine basis. They would pull off the patch, treat the areas. And that successfully, after about 3 to 6 months, that diminished greatly. And usually after a year, you barely see anything at all, particularly in the responders. The responders seem to really quiesce quite a bit. All right, and there was only one grade 4 reaction, which was erythema with vesicles, so they had kind of like ulcerations and everything. But for the vast majority, it was just this mild to moderate kind of site reactions. And this was all graded. A lot of this was graded by the parents themselves rather than us, the investigators. So this was a patient-reported diary. So summarize. So significantly more toddlers in the peanut patch treatment group had response versus placebo. So the patch was found to be safe with mainly topical site reactions that are improved over the course of therapy. The next steps is really up to the FDA and what needs to be done prior to submission for the BLA, whether they would like to do another safety trial. I don't know. This has been done in a lot of children thus far, but not necessarily this age group. So well, that's still pending about if this becomes, when will this become an approved therapy for toddlers? Because currently there is none. So the older patch trial. So if you recall, the BLA for the older children was denied by the FDA in August of 2020. The primary concern that the FDA raised was related to the adhesion of the patch and its contribution to efficacy, which I saw and many people saw during the course of the therapy. These are much larger and much more active kids. So a lot of times the patches would just fall off of them from their activities. So they went back to the drawing board and redesigned the patch. And so this was the Evolve study, which is now completed, which we participated in. We had, I think, the number 1 or number 2 enroller here in Seattle. And so this was a new, and it's a circular patch, so it doesn't have a corner to it. And there was several improvements. And you know, when the kids presented to being part of the study, I told them, like, do everything, swim, run, play whatever you want to do, you know, see, you know, put this thing through the rigors, and it seemed to adhere pretty darn well. And so they took that information and now have created a brand new clinical trial, which is a phase 3 pivotal trial that they're repeating for the older children. And this is open to enrollment. So anybody who has a kid out there who is between the ages of 4 to 7 with a peanut allergy can be included in this trial. And we want to recruit heavily. We want to bring this hopefully to the market at some point in not too distant future. So anybody out there who's interested, please you can contact me, and I'll get you in contact with my coordinators, and we can get them into the trial. So it's a 1-year trial. So, and there's an entry and exit double blind, just like it's basically the same type of challenge as before. The biggest difference with this trial versus the other trials in terms of the challenge is the challenge material. They've improved it quite a bit. The challenge material for the other one was disgusting. Honestly, it was probably the most revolting thing I've ever seen or tasted in my life. And the new one is pretty dark. It's actually okay. So so this will be a much easier, a more palatable thing. Just imagine taking a 7-year-old through something that just, it was like a combination of cough syrup, like cherry cough syrup, and like slightly warm baby food. It was that with a hint of peanut. Yeah. Yeah, so the new one is this kind of chocolatey thing. It's not bad. Okay, so some oral immunotherapy. So the Aimmune product. So we've been involved with this for since it's the pivotal phase 3, so ARCO 3, ARCO 4, and their safety trial. And now it is a FDA approved therapy. All of the trials are now completed for the peanut trial. So AR101 or Palforzia was introduced early in 2020, and we've implemented it to a certain extent. So we're beyond pilot stage at this point, and several of us docs at Northwest do this, and Dr. Burnett, Trevor over in Richland is doing it out there in Eastern Washington. It's taking quite a few kids through it. And initially it was god awful. It was terrible. The process was excruciating. There were so many mistakes by everybody. So the interface was terrible. And then over the course of a year, that's gotten so much better. And it's actually relatively smooth right now. Right when they necessarily deciding to sell them. So the future outlook of Aimmune is unclear at this point because I don't, as far as I know, no specific buyers, but for right now, it's working well. I'm enrolling kids into the peanut as I have space. It is time intensive and labor intensive for everybody involved. But and if you have spots for it, it's a relatively easy thing. And if anybody out there wants help getting started with doing it, I am happy to kind of lend my expertise and help to you. I have a bunch of forms for like check-in, as well as like things to kind of like for like notes and other stuff to kind of help kind of guide you guys through it, and some suggestions about reactions and things that have occurred. I've taken now well over 100 or so children through this specific product and through clinical research trials and clinical actual doing it in clinic. So I have a lot of kind of boots on the ground experience with this. All right, so some other OIT studies. So there was a wonderful study that Aimmune did for a little while, and it was the egg OIT study that was hindered by the pandemic, and then they killed it, and then Nestle had no interest in resuming it, so that died. Interesting enough, I took a bunch of kids from that trial because we had the most in the country, and converted them, and almost all of them have now outgrown their egg allergy. It really kind of booted them. These are all the kids we had on were all baked egg fails. So every single one of them were a baked egg fail that got started through this, and then we converted them through, and now they've all kind of are in a stage where they can eat egg ad lib at this point. So it really got them going on front. So it was disappointing. Thankfully, other people have kind of taken up the kind of the cause of the alternative other foods besides just peanut, and that's Alladapt. So Alladapt is a company down in the Bay Area, and they initiated something called the Harmony Food Trial, which is based off a lot of the work on from Dr. Nadeau, and it has a top 13 food allergens all in one. So it's all in one type of thing. And so in this trial, you could have up to 5 different foods and be enrolled into it. So it has milk, eggs, tree nuts, including the cross-reactive tree nuts, which is interesting, as well as peanuts. It has fish in it, has shellfish in it, so it has and wheat it has many different things. So I have some shellfish kids in it. I have cashew kids, peanut kids, soy kids, wheat kids. I had almost every variety where we had really no good options for them that got enrolled to this trial. Top line data looking really positive. They haven't, and there's going to be the first abstracts for this. Going to be, it's all embargo, so I can't share anything with you guys. But it's all going to be presented. The first set are going to be presented at Yaki and coming up, and then there's going to be more that stuff I'm working on that's going to be presented at the college and then quad. So there's going to be a bunch of stuff about this in the not too distant future. We're in the planning stages of phase 3, so that'll probably be quarter one of next year, possibly. So we'll see about that one. These were not just children, so these were 4 to 55-year-olds. So we had adults doing this trial as well, and the outcome for the little ones looked pretty darn good. Adults are challenging, so I don't think they're going to move forward with adults, but it's going to be kids. No, it's a this kind of like semi-solid yeah, so it's like this like loose cookie. So like a so it's kind of like a sugar cookie, but a little softer than that. And there's a lot of adulterants in it to make it not taste what you would imagine it would taste like. Actually, it doesn't taste bad. And the interesting yeah, the texture is actually interesting. There's a bunch of ways you can make it good. You can make this like kind of cool like a brownie, like a brownie batter thing out of it, and it's actually delicious. So yeah, so it's really kind of neat. Although just like any food immunotherapy, people get tired of it. If you're on stuff like this, if you eat the same thing every single day for a year or two, you get tired of it. So it's all still desensitization. So there's no cure here. It basically they've matched Aimmune to get to about past 600 milligrams of the respective allergen that there was their reactive thing. It's really actually to present it once all that stuff comes out, it will be very complicated. There'll probably be way more slides because there's so many different allergens, so many different things. And it's a really complicated thing that they set up, but it's admirable that they did it. It's actually a fascinating company. It's almost entirely female led. It's all ladies. It's kind of awesome. They're wonderful to work with. All right, so there's some other trials that are going on that are using biologics. And so several years ago, we did the MTAC study, which was Xolair plus food OIT, but there a lot of people are now investigating whether just the anti-IgEs can be useful to kind of like raise thresholds for allergies. So currently, COFAR is doing a study with Xolair in respect to that, and Novartis is doing the study with Ligelizumab to investigate this as well. And so Ligelizumab is a humanized IgG1 monoclonal antibody that binds with a higher affinity to the C epsilon 3 receptor domain of the IgE more than omalizumab does. And it was originally investigated to look at CIU, but and they thought it was going to be more effective than omalizumab, it wasn't, so they discontinued it. So it's no longer being pursued for that indication. They also looked at it for asthma, but it didn't really work for asthma. So they're focusing strictly on just ligelizumab and food. And so right now they've kind of closed the study. And so it's for 12 years and older to get monthly ligelizumab. And they're looking into some dose modifications as well as potentially some other allergens in the future besides just peanut as a treatment thing. I have no results on that one. That's still kind of up in the air right now. So some non-OIT food trials. So, oops, that's not right. So it's not peanut vaccine, sorry. That's a typo. So Novartis is also utilizing their BTK inhibitor and as a potential treatment for food allergies. So BTK is a very important kinase for mast cell degranulation. So if we look over here at this kind of image, you can see IgE binding to the Fc epsilon receptor, and that binds to an antigen cross-links. And so this stimulates BTK kinase with PLC gamma and then leads to the calcium-triggered degranulation of the mast cell. Inhibiting BTK can prevent this, and so it's a potentially basically make somebody not be able to anaphylax and not being able to granulate. Yes.
What's the dosing schedule on this one?
It's daily, once to twice a day, oral. Yes. So it's not a vaccine. It's a misprint. It's a capsule. So it's a drug. And so it's a phase two trial, and it's actively recruiting right now. So because it's so exploratory, it's going to only be adults, so 18 to 55. So if there's anybody who has a 18, 19, 20-year-old who's interested in trying something out, it's relatively short trial, but kind of intense in its visits, and it goes for about a month. So it's challenge, treatment for a month, and then proceeds by the exit challenge, and that's really about it. So it's not about desensitization, or it's just about changing how you respond to this allergen, and hopefully, if this works, prevent you from actually reacting to anything. All right, so there's this other kind of interesting trial that's currently being worked on. So this is let me get this thing off the top, Drew. Oh, there we go. So the Cour trial, or CNP 201, is this nanoparticle that encapsulates peanut protein extract. And the idea behind this one is that this IV infusion, which is one of the reasons why it's kind of hard to enroll for, this IV infusion kind of goes specifically to antigen presenting cells and kind of gets it onto the surface, and then that processes it through and then potentially leads to T regulatory formation, and then thereby kind of changing the immune response to it. A lot of the preclinical work was done locally here. We did over at Benaroya. So Clint Dunn worked on a lot of the preclinical stuff. So one of our former fellows looking at this as a modality. And it's currently still in the phase 1 trial, and we're looking to it. They're actually looking for cure. So they have some signal for sustained unresponsiveness by doing it this way. How long that stays for, we don't know. This is all just about safety in this phase 1B trial. 16 years and older for this one. So anybody who's very adventurous, who has a peanut allergy, we are looking for. All right, primary prevention. So we have another study looking at prevention through use of probiotics. And so Stialto is a company that has this microbiome product, so this live biotherapeutic, And we participated in the early parts of this trial. So the safety trial where we just made sure that it was safe in like older kids as well as in infants. And now we're in the efficacy stage. So this is all neonates. So this is are all neonates between now they're up to 2 weeks of age. Used to be just 1 week. So now up to 2 weeks of age to start to be randomized into receiving this probiotic versus placebo. In order for them to be part of it, they have to have a family history of some sort of allergy. So whether it's food, atopic dermatitis, allergic rhinitis, asthma. And we're actively recruiting for pregnant mothers and neonates who are less than 2 weeks of age. It's unlikely for us to be able to like have a baby born and come into the clinic. This is all kind of like moms who are kind of interested in participating in this, who have an atopic history. Surprisingly enough, there's been quite a bit of a lot of motivation for this one. So a lot of moms are super interested. Probiotics are huge, and so we're in kind of crunchy Seattle. So probiotics is an interesting modality that a lot of people want, and it's oftentimes in baby formulas. There's probiotics in baby formulas. So this is something hopefully will have some impact in the not too distant future. Okay, and it's relatively benign for the most part for the first bunch of months. There's not a lot of like poking for the kids, so it's a very peds friendly trial. When they get bigger, of course, there is stuff what they look for. So really it's on seeing if they start the atopic march or not. That's the big thing. And so this is a long-term study all the way up to like 5 years of age of observation after they complete a year of this therapy. Okay, so chronic hives. Very messy slide, but this kind of shows all the different kind of areas of investigation as well as failed investigation along the way. And so looking at kind of different things to inhibit the mast cell. And we're going to focus on what we're doing here in Seattle, which is the remibrutinib study. So remibrutinib is that what I was referring to with the peanut trial. So this is a pivotal phase 3 trial for CIU. What I'm presenting here is the data from the phase 2 trial. So keep in mind, this was done during the teeth of the pandemic. All right. So as a lot of us know, BTK is pretty important for a bunch of different functions besides what we've learned in the last decade or so, which is related to mast cells, but it's also important for B cells and B cell formation. Antibody creation is also important for platelets and other things. And so this was a 12-week treatment trial to establish a dose response. So this was a phase 2 trial. And so they had doses between 10 to 100 milligrams. So they had 10, 35, 100, and a BID dosing of 10, 25, 100. So there was people on 100 milligrams twice a day of this drug, right? Much higher than what ultimately was used in the phase 3 trial. And they were found to be much more effective in terms of the improvement. So on the bottom here is the relative change in the Urticaria score, so UAS7, relative to placebo. So you can see that it was a significant improvement across the board in terms of relative to placebo. So they chose the most efficacious dose, which I think I forget exactly what dose. It was like 10 to 25 milligrams. But it found, and so this led to the phase 3 trial that I'm going to talk about in a second. All right, so which was called Remix 2. And so this is an 18-year and over who to recruit for this trial, they had to have failed on high-dose antihistamines. Almost everybody we recruited for had failed Xolair. So these were absolute Xolair fails. One of which was also a cyclosporin fail. And I don't have any sort of data. I can just tell you anecdotally. It's working. It works fast too. So we had a patient who had completed the placebo control, was in the active phase, and they were put in the extension, and they randomized that person to placebo versus an active in their extension. And within the next day, they had a severe high flare up. It was so bad that they couldn't even close their hand. It was so bad. And we had to wait a couple of days to gather the scores, and we got them restarted on it. They took it in the afternoon. By that evening, their hives were gone. So it's pretty potent stuff. Again, we'll have to get the ultimate safety profile for this because it is a BTK inhibitor, and so you do worry about like clotting, and you do worry about immune compromise. But just to note, the dose that they use in this trial is much lower than what they did in the other trial with the 100 milligrams twice a day. And that was all during the pandemic. People got COVID, they stopped it, they recovered from COVID, got back on it. So it seems to not have a significant safety signal when it comes to for immune system compromise. So some new trials are going to be starting later this year for remibrutinib. So we're going to have a 12 and over and up trial that's going to be starting, I think maybe Q3, Q4 of this year. And they're also investigating spontaneous inducible urticaria. So like the cold urticarics and like the heat folks and dermatographics. So that is also being included. Those people, the spontaneous inducibles, were excluded from this CSU trial, okay, specifically. So while some of them did have it, their primary disease was going to be was CSU. Right. So EOE. So that's been the other big thing that we've kind of shifted over the last few years to. With our collaborator, we have this wonderful collaborator, Dr. Bernstein, who's been delightful in working with us and doing our endoscopies for this. And so we've completed the Regeneron EOE, and as you probably all know, that trial led to the approval of Dupixent for the treatment of EOE. I've been using it to great effect. So I've been using this. I had a few patients through the trial, and a lot of people ask me how what I do with them, like after we get them started. So a lot of the EOE patients I've started on this have been kind of older teenagers, like college age students, among other people who have their EOE can be somewhat controlled with the swallowed steroids, but also pretty significant dietary restrictions. So that the dairy elimination is really what kind of helps quite a bit of them, but it's really hard diet to stick with, especially for a college student. Like you can't eat pizza, you can't eat like regular stuff. So they have to think about this. And then they feel the esophageal spasms, everything feels worse. And so I say, well, I put them on this, and then 3 months, I have the esophagus heals, because that's kind of what we did in the trial, where we put them on drug for 3 months, and then we rescoped them. And then at that point, everything kind of normalizes. So the epithelium becomes kind of intact, everything becomes intact. And so I think, we don't know a ton about the disease process. It's actually fascinating to me that Dupixent works so well in this group where everything else kind of utterly failed. So I think we're starting to understand the pathomechanism of this, that it's definitely a T2 driven response. But I think what's crucial is that if the mucosa is not intact, then you're going to be exposed to all these different foods when you swallow them. But if you make the mucosa intact and you inhibit this response, you can then eat whatever you want. So then I liberalize their diet. And so they can eat whatever they want. They're unrestricted. They're no longer swallowing that disgusting slurry of Splenda or honey, and they're budesonide, or swallowing Flovent, which is questionable efficacy, and they actually get better and they feel great. And so without having to worry about it. So it kind of frees them up and they're delighted. And it's weekly injections, which is a drag. The trial one parts of the trial was where they tried to do it every 2 weeks. The every 2 week spread didn't really, it improved histologically, but not improved their symptom scores. The weekly dose was the one that actually helped with their symptom score. So the EOE trial for Regeneron specifically excluded the EGIT patients. So anybody with a sort of lower, so eosinophilic gastroenteritis was excluded from that. But they are about to initiate a trial for those patients coming up, right? So we are in the initiating stages. We're going to have our site initiated visit coming up. And those of you who take care of these patients, these guys are a little bit different. So this is very different than EOE. Sometimes the EOEs happen to have this as well, but it's usually not the primary cause of disease. The stomach and the duodenum with this invasion, these patients are pretty miserable people. There's not really good therapies. The steroids, apart from systemic steroids, don't really have good benefit, and that's not good for kids. So I have a few patients in an investigator-initiated compassionate dose trials of this. So I have some 6, 7, 8-year-olds who are taking this. These were kids that were so bad. They one child in particular that I recall was on a all elemental formula. He was 8, all elemental formula completely, and salmon. That's the only thing he was able to eat. Everything else caused him to be severely nauseous and vomiting. And nothing was working for this kid. I started him on Dupixent at a dose, and we have some idea. He's on, I think, every 2 weeks right now. His last scope completely clean, Symptoms seem to be gone, and we're slowly weaning off steroids, slowly kind of introducing foods to this kiddo, and hopefully it goes well. But they're going to actually start the pivotal trial for this in the not too distant future for these kiddos. So if you have them, keep them in mind that we have a treatment trial potentially for them. The other company that was looking for EGID was Allakos with their anti-cyclic 8. Unfortunately, they failed their primary endpoint. I think Allakos had a decent drug. So anti-cyclic 8 targets, if we go back here, so anti-cyclic 8, cyclic 8 is right here on the mast cell. It also is on eosinophils as well. And so when they had an antibody AK002 that binds to cyclic 8, which inhibits mast cell kind of activation and also can target mast cells for destruction, and also targets eosinophils for destruction, similar to like benralizumab in how it does that. And so the phase 2 trial had some really good positive signal, but the phase 3 trial didn't. And I think what happened was they got too happy with recruiting patients. They took basically all comers. So, and we don't truly know what the normal levels of mast cells are in the GI tract, or in the stomach. So when you biopsy it, somebody says, I'm having all this diarrhea and abdominal symptoms, could just have IBS. And they happen to have increased levels of mast cells, whatever that means. And so those are people they recruited for this trial. And those patients aren't going to get better with this. I had a few patients that had true EGID without any doubt, and they got way better on this. So I think they just did not target the right population. And so they've kind of moved on to other indications. So the cyclic 8 folks are now looking at CSU, I think is their big thing, which potentially could be something. And atopic dermatitis is the other thing that they're doing. So that was based off of what Regeneron told me, his relative weight, and so that's why we did it that way. So for the bigger kids, you can imagine somebody on that type of diet, not very big. So that's why they thought based on the kinetics profile, and that was the suggestion. All right, but we have the opportunity to change it as we need to. I don't know. I don't know right now. I think it will be every week because it's for the 12 and above. But this was a younger child, so there's investigation for the younger ones. Hey, so other actively recruiting trials. So AstraZeneca, we have 2 trials with them, both with pretty rare diseases. So EGPA. So EGPA, it's a benralizumab versus mepolizumab trial. So they have to have confirmed EGPA. They have to be on steroids, but have never been on an anti-IL-5. We're talking about a pretty rare person at this part of the game. So usually this is not something I can find locally. This is somebody who's out in the boonies somewhere. To somebody who just doesn't prescribe biologics. And so they're just like, oh, here's your steroids, come back every 6 months or every year and we'll refill your steroids, which those are my 2 patients that I got. So if you go out there and hear about somebody, or anybody out there has somebody who would be interested in doing this, the big difference, of course, is there is 3 injections for Mepo versus 1 injection for Benra, 18 and above. Another relatively newly started, this is very new because it just initiated last week, hypereosinophilic syndrome with benralizumab versus placebo. Oops, so it should be confirmed HES, but never started on an anti-IL-5, and this is a 12 and above trial. Also active recruiting. So again, this is not a super common thing because right now, if you get diagnosed with this, you're going to get put on mepolizumab. So if anybody out there has anybody who's interested, we have this available. And the only asthma trial that I have going right now is with GSK. If you notice, this place, the group used to be called Asthma Inc., but asthma has become a much smaller component of this. And this is for moderate severe persistent asthma who are on an anti-IL-5 currently. So these are people who are on Nepo or benralizumab, either one. And they're randomized either to continue the drug that they're on or this long-acting version of an anti-IL-5, which is going to be given if they get enough people once every 6 months is the dosing. So while they're in trial, though, they're blinded, so they're still getting all their injections anyway. So it's not going to change anything while they're in the trial. So this is for the future patients who will get the benefit of having the twice a year injectable, but not for the patients themselves in the trial. So this is 12 and above as well. We also have been having challenges recruiting for this trial as well. I have not had any takers for this one. A lot of people who are on biologics are very happy and stable. Out of all the trials I've had for asthma, this is the only one that I'm willing to do because there's no placebo. So everybody's on therapy. So I am unwilling to even entertain the idea of a placebo-controlled asthma trial at this point. If you, I know the FDA mandates it as part of what FDA wants to do, but I think that's unethical at this point with so many therapies that we have now. It needs to be a standard of care versus, it needs to be like cancer trials where you have standard of care versus this new thing. And that's how you compare. So everybody gets therapy. But so like this one. So this is my last slide. So Seattle Allergy Research Institute here. I got to thank my sub-investigators, Dr. Winteroth, who spent a week dedicating her time to us, Dr. Allman, who covers for me, who's not here today, but thank you, and Dr. Tatum, who's here, and Dr. Braun, who has been helpful and covering for me as when I've been away. My staff and my managers, Lisa Miller and Allison, and then my reg guy, who I absolutely adore because he keeps me out of trouble, Robin, and then my great medical assistants and research coordinators, a whole host of them, Joy, Tara, Marissa, Marquita, thank you very much. And then to everybody who's given their time and effort, all the participants, I'm very grateful. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to do anything. Okay, and that's it, unless I have questions. I don't see anything in the chats. The CEO of the company doesn't know. So I don't know. Hopefully soon. They just unlikely. No, it's not going to be 2023 because it's going to be 9 months after they submit, and they haven't submitted. So it would have to be 2024. If they want them to do a safety trial, add another year to that. Okay, but then we would do the safety trial, and so you would have and so the safety trials are great because there's no challenges. So they get randomized, and then DBV has been a lovely company where, you know, even if you're on placebo, you get randomized into like this open label thing where you get a patch for free for until it becomes FDA approved. So if that happens, then this will be a free thing for them. If not, then hopefully it gets approved relatively soon. So it's all up to the FDA at this point. They have to engage. And last, when I spoke to them in February at the Quad, it did not. Well, actually, I was at the test meeting. They still don't have not heard back from them yet. FDA has been a little busy and short-staffed. I don't know what that feels like. Yeah, so they are. Hopefully, they get a product going. They have a whole host of pipeline, so they want to bring back the patch, milk patch. That was an interesting thing that happened. So because it took a long time to recruit for the milk patch trial, it was a phase 2 trial, so they had 3 different doses, and at the highest dose, they just assumed they were still recruiting, but at the highest dose, they weren't. They still were recruiting. So they hadn't done the efficacy study, so they randomized everybody in the extension to the highest dose, thinking that it's the most effective being the higher dose. Actually, it turned out that the proteins would cross-linked at the higher dose, and so it couldn't actually get into the skin. So the medium dose was actually way better because of that, and so they have that data now, so they can take it. It's just they need to get a product on the market. So because they have not made any money, they just spent lots of money, but they have an egg thing working. I know that they're working on this EOE EOE milk patch thing. That's something that's going to be a potential. So Jonathan Spergel is working on that, and it's done some preliminary work with that to see if that has some signal as well. It has some potential there too. But yeah, so they have a whole pipeline of stuff. So they're looking at many besides just the peanut. I can imagine, and I hope that they bring it down to even younger, to like 6-month-old, and just get it going. So the more we now know, the younger it is, the better it is. And it's a real pain to get toddlers to eat something consistently. So having a patch on their back and then converting them at some point in the future, that's kind of what I envision, is that I have a peanut, milk, and egg allergic patch, get them up to a point, and then convert them over, and then they're able to eat it when they're much more cooperative. But that's for the future. But I think 5 years in the future. So I call SAARI Allergy Clinic 5 years in the future, because if you project it out 5 years from now, the stuff that I was doing. So when I was a fellow, like you guys up here, I was doing Palisade. So I was doing ARC-03. And so that was 2014 into 2015. So 5 years future, got approved in 2020. So yeah, so a lot of stuff will change, I think. And there's a lot of hope for the future going forward. I think that's how I counsel my patients, is that I'm giving you numbers like will my peanut allergy, will I grow my peanut allergy, will I grow my tree nut allergy? I'm giving you numbers of what 2023 is, what 2028 will be, 2030 will be, when this kid is now 5, 6, 7 years old. Could be a completely different story. And there could be a whole host of interventions and different things that we can do in modulation of things, and potentially curative type processes as well. Anybody else? All right.
What's the word?
Allergen. Allergen. Where are the days? Allergen.
Dan, do you know if Aimmune is put all the other foods on hold since Nestle pulled out, or any?
Yeah, so everything else is all killed. So the other reason why all the studies, the long-term studies, were all killed was because of Nestle and all of this. So it was very abrupt when ARC-08 was stopped, because there was a lot of active stuff that was happening. So a lot of kids were kind of blending over, and so they just kind of strung them out. So it was really not friendly. It didn't really impact our patients, because our patients were long gone at that point. But there were some toddler kids that were just completed their trial, and they were kind of abandoned. So it wasn't the most friendly thing in the world to do. And it's just Nestle. So
Unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan, this is Vinod here. Thank you again. You're doing an awesome job over there, with all the trials, and thank you for the update. Lots going on, so it's very good and exciting to hear. That's something for the kids to look forward to, or adults to look forward to. Maybe just 3 things in mind. One was, for your, for some of the indications where you're using Dupixent, and they have adverse reactions, do you have any alternatives for them? Or say, for instance, IL-13, I didn't hear about that in terms of some of the, say EOE or in the other indications where you may be of use or not useful.
There's lots of investigation happening in EOE space. I think Tezzy is also looking into it as well. And so everybody's kind of replicating Dupixent, which is like hitting like all the indications in allergy. I think all the other ones are kind of exploring those things as well. So just like for nasal polyps, we're probably going to have like a whole host of, and asthma, we're going to have a whole host of other things for that might be useful. Yes, we're not doing it.
The second, did you have any thoughts? A patient asked about the allergy amulet device. I'm sure you or others have any thoughts in your allergen detection, for patients or parents as a device. Are you familiar with that, or you use it clinically?
I don't personally use it clinically. I'm not aware specifically about any utility for it or its efficacy. I know there's been investigations of those type of devices in the past to detect allergens. I'm just wondering about their liability insurance, what that's like, because if you have a false negative, what's that going to be like for the patient? But yeah, no, I have no kind of real world experience or research experience with that one.
Okay. And lastly, meaning just to clarify, with the Nestle buy over, the Palforzia is still going strong, but just not recruiting for other foods. Is that the takeaway from that?
Yeah, right now it's the system that they set in place. Has been good. So it's I have not seen anything in terms of, because I get reports every week from my I would get reports every week when I come into clinic before. Now I hear nothing, and we have more patients than ever on it. So it's going well. I tell them, the Aimmune colleagues, and I told Steve this, like, it's ironic that they got their engine finally rolling, and then Nestle just wants to jump ship. I'm like, you got it. You're humming now. Like, this is not the time to jump ship. This is good.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.